Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back again with me, Yusuf Akuri, your host for Real Talk. And with me is Father Gerard Vincent Barry, a Roman Catholic priest from Blackburn, but has served in many different parts of the country. I was going to say the world, but you have travelled around the world, and has served in different environments, be it hostile or friendly or of medical nature in hospitals and other areas. We were and we are still talking about topical ethical issues which as Muslims, as Christians and people of the book, the holy books find difficult to deal with and maybe answer some of these questions to our own flocks, as well as people of other faiths who question these issues, things like euthanasia, abortion, assisted dying, or dying with dignity. We were talking about dying with dignity and whether there is such a thing. My question to Father Jed was, what if, Father, if there was an individual sat between us right now, said to us, he or she, they've got 1 week, 1 month or whatever time left, because the doctors have said there's no hope, there's no operations, there's no medicine now. And within a month, that's the maximum we give you. But that individual has now decided that rather than me going on to morphine and all these other drugs or dying a painful death, which now many, not just millionaires or billionaires, not the lay people, general public, are going to Switzerland, Germany and other parts of the world to have their assisted dying or dying with dignity and having an lethal injection or some sort of another, taking that and dying in and around those things, loved ones or items that they like. What's there to stop this person doing that in your faith, and what is the stance of your faith?
First of all, there's nothing to stop people doing things themselves, and never has been. All these questions I've had, they seem very dry and technical, but we are a faith of love. It is the faith of love, and it's very difficult when you meet somebody in suffering and you watch them in suffering and you want to show them love. If somebody was sat between us now saying that they'd been given so long to live and they wanted to decide for themselves when they would die, you couldn't have anything but a great deal of sympathy with that person. How could you not feel that? I would simply say to them that life is not dignified by feeling okay. There is dignity in everybody's life. That there are people who've lived their lives in suffering who've shown so much dignity. And I sometimes worry that when somebody gets to a point in their life where suddenly become frailer or sicker, have some pain, a lot of pain, that somehow or other that's not dignified when other people have lived their whole life like that, sometimes quite short lives. So I'm a bit concerned about the phrase death with dignity. There is a dignity in all dying if it's beautifully and well done. And the other thing I'd say is nobody knows how long you've got to live. My own father, our own father, he very suddenly was diagnosed, you probably remember, with cancer. It was an Easter day, you remember?
Yes,
I was at work,
yes.
I missed Easter. And we were told that he had a few days to live, and they would stop giving him any extra help or care that they said wasn't helping him, but he'd have a few days to say goodbye. He died in 4 hours. Nobody knows what's going to happen. So I'd be very concerned about the truncation, the ending of life. I would also say to that person, what makes you think that you're going to go through suffering? What makes you think there is not other hope? What makes you think that your family can't show you love and care in return? My dad, I remember years before he was ever ill, said, if I was ever so ill I couldn't look after myself, I wouldn't want to be a burden to you. To which our only reply was, well, when we were kids, you looked after us. Why can't we look after you? The church's teaching is that life was given by God and is not ours to take. That's the church's clear teaching, and I hold that teaching to be true. And to somebody who's traipsing across to Switzerland, the Dignitas clinic, even the name Dignitas, when you watch the documentaries, ain't that dignified? But I would say to them, there is much more to life than the living well. There's also the living, the dignified living at the end too. The passage of life includes the dying and sadly the suffering. But I always remember a very famous lady who founded the hospice movement, Dame Cecily Saunders, saying about a doctor who'd given a lethal injection to somebody because he couldn't stop their pain. She said, "Why didn't you send him to me? I'm the expert. I could stop your pain." In hospices, people go in saying, "I want to die. I will never feel better." They go into a hospice, and within days, the pain's sorted out, their sense of self-worth is sorted out, and many of them say, I never thought I'd feel this well again. And they have an opportunity to say goodbye well. I think most people's fear is that they're saying goodbye would be terrible. And yet for a lot of people, if we really funded the hospice movement the way it should be, many people would never even think about this dying with dignity. They die with real dignity. Life is precious. The end of life is equally precious. I have been with several people dying this week in the hospital. I have been with people dying with children, elderly people, people at different stages of life, dying from many different reasons. I don't speak from ignorance. I don't speak from ignorance.
You do not. You do not. You speak with wisdom and a lot of knowledge behind you and a lot of experience. Now, let's not drag ourselves into this whole mundane dying part of it. Let's look at some of the good work that you've done. And you've been a traveller's chaplain, and you've been a chaplain in prisons and criminal sort of world, and helping those vulnerable, I say, adults, teenagers, young boys, young men, and sometimes young women caught up in the vicious circle of, I say, offending and criminality. And it's not specific. Criminality or crime, drugs, alcohol-related issues are not specific to any faith. It's everybody and anybody, any society and any community will have that. What do you have to say in terms of, I mean, you as an experienced, seasoned chaplain in these areas, the current whole issue of drugs and criminality and where we're going as a nation, as a country, and how we, people of faith, can do something about it. I'm not going to touch upon theological and commonalities because I'm going to use that and save that because I want you to come back again, Father. But give us your thoughts on this. And you work, live, and are surrounded by 3 mosques, as you've said, in Blackburn. Prior to that, you worked in, further up north, maybe a Durham, a cathedral city, a city, maybe, I don't think there's any mosques there, maybe, and mainly white English Caucasian people. Now you're in a sort of Asian sort of an area with 3 mosques. You live in different, you've lived and travelled a lot of experience. Where are we going wrong?
You know, if I had the answer to that, I'd be a multimillionaire, wouldn't I? Let's do it a slightly different way.
Okay.
Ask ourselves the question, why is it that people are coming into prison in greater numbers, young men and young women, from areas where they never came into prison? You know, they live in areas where you didn't get that many people coming to prison. Why are people from old mining areas, steel areas, shipyard areas, mill towns, where you didn't get many people coming into prison? Overwhelmingly, as you know, it's drugs. The vast majority of crimes are in some way related to drugs and caused by drug use, drug dealing. People in the old areas of industry are now hopeless. They're not worse than their fathers or grandfathers or great-grandfathers. They just didn't, they had a job, they would have had a job in the old days. They would have had a skill, they would have had hope to look forward to. Now so many of them, they don't have that hope. It's all working in supermarkets or fast food places on 0 hours contracts. Don't get me wrong, it's work, and some of those are wonderful employers, but it is not, they're not giving themselves skills anymore. they have gone into despair. And they've turned in their despair to drugs. And it's in every town, every village. It's now spread into rural areas quite rapidly. As you say, in every ethnicity. Travelling people, since they've been stopped from travelling, they didn't used to be so involved in drugs. Now it is, because drugs have been brought onto sites or onto where they're settled. I believe drugs are a sense of deep despair, massive despair. And once you've got that monkey on your back, you know the expression, you can't get a monkey off your back because it moves, it's very difficult to move on in life. We have seen in prison people willing to take terrible risks to get drugs. You and I worked in the same prison for many years. We have seen people so drug-addled that they've harmed themselves, taken their own lives. We've seen people going from looking athletic to looking like they're from a concentration camp. They've gone so thin. I worked with women, of course, in what was the last really of the old high security women's sections in Durham prison before they shut that down. The self-harm amongst women is appalling. And you've seen that self-harm. 90% of all crimes are in some way drug-related. Now, what can we do? I think as group peoples of faith, we can offer them something else. We can say to them, there is hope beyond who and what you are. This is not your only possibility in life. There is something else. Many of them feel they have no self-worth, no dignity, no hope, that they're not special, that they are rubbish. And we can say to them, you're not. You're not rubbish. You're special. You are unique in the world. There is nobody who has ever existed like you. In prison, what do you have? You come into prison. You lose your name. You're a number. You lose your home, your family. If you had a job, you lose your job. You get stripped bare, strip searched. The one thing you retain is your right to religious self-definition. And many guys and many women who may not have practiced their faith a long time suddenly define themselves. And then they have sat in front of them somebody like you or me. And many of us have connections in one way or another with family or things, and we're able to talk to them. And through different groups, through listening to them, spending time with them, we can let them think or imagine beyond the parameters, beyond the fence that's been put around them, the perimeter fence around them. We can tell them they're special. It's not easy though. Recidivism, the repeating of crime, especially with drug relationships, is very, very high, 85%, 90% in many places. But that you get a chance with people, especially when they're approaching 28, the average age of death. For a drug user, I went into the prison service quite simply full time because I got sick, heart sick, burying young men. In Rochdale, I buried, in a short period of time, 35 young men. It's an amazing synchronicity under the age of 35 who died of non-accidental reasons, or they didn't die from cancer. It was all something caused because of drugs or drink. Most have been in prison, came out, there was no hope. We have to find a better way than allowing people just to die or just to be locked up. We have to find a better way, and faith can do that.
Faith can do that and should do that, and working together, we should be able to work a solution out, and we should be working together in this area. Many of our viewers may well be asking, well, it's haram, Father, it's haram. Forgive my expression, but it's forbidden. Drugs, alcohol, or I mean, maybe alcohol not for the Christian faith, but it's something that is harmful in excess, should I say, for yourself. Maybe your muftis and bishops would say, everything in moderation and anything in excess, and again, alcohol, I'd say, you guys would say the same thing. If it was addictive and it was taking somebody down the wrong path of violence, of crime, of anything else. Now, you've mentioned something of drugs and alcohol. I'm not an expert on Christianity. What is the position of drugs on Christianity?
Well, as far as the church is concerned, and Christians full stop are concerned, anything that causes damage to you is bad. Anything that is harmful, you'd call it haram. We would say it is just wrong. Nothing should be there that damages your body or your mind or your heart. Taking in any substance which will harm yourself in such a way is bad. People will say to me, well, people smoke. Well, people shouldn't smoke, okay?
I mean, you've lived, I mean, you talked about a very good example. I mean, forgive my term, very, very bad example of what you've lived through. You saw about 35 or so young men below the age of 35 being buried, and you were doing the funerals and everything else. And that's what led you to work in prisons and wanting to do that. But again, these were related to maybe drugs or alcohol. Yeah. You live in an Asian sort of an area. You've seen everything there, and you know what's going on. Let's not beat about the bush and hide the head like an ostrich in the sand. What's going on in Muslim communities or Asian communities? What would you say to those mothers, fathers, Muslims, non-Muslims, whoever's watching, about their children? What advice would you give them? Maybe in Blackburn, maybe in the north, maybe anywhere.
I'd give the same advice I give to any parent. Understand your children. Don't give your children any excuse to say, you want to cut me off. Don't give them an excuse to say, you don't want to help me, you don't want to love me, because that is the cry of every addict, by the way. I do this because of you. And understand that an addiction is an illness. We don't blame a person with cancer for having cancer. We don't look at somebody with a limb missing and say, oh, you're a horrible person. An addiction, be it alcohol or drugs, is an illness. People experiment, and with drink maybe you may see some of your children and be worried about them, and it's haram in your language. But I would say to you, you can come away from it if it's just a passing phase. It's not good, I'm not encouraging it, never would, but just be aware there is light, and if you're there full of love, there is light. I'd also say, and I would plead to all communities on this, don't try and hide it amongst yourselves. There is help out there. Don't feel that you must be ashamed if one of your children or a family member has an addiction. Don't be ashamed to get them help. Get them help. And it's not a matter of shame. You wouldn't not take your child to the doctors if they badly damaged their arm or broke the leg, or if they were showing some kind of serious illness. Don't be afraid to look for help. That is my concern. That is my concern.
Well, Father, it's been great having you. Time is not with us. Well, I did want to go on to certain issues of commonalities between Christians and Muslims, and maybe different ways of practice, of prayers, of alms, of charity, of pilgrimage. Yes, pilgrimage as well. And, you know, fasting, as you would and I would, and there you would be munching away on a packet of crisps whilst I was fasting in Ramadan and being a bit moody. But
very moody.
Very moody, okay. But we would watch football sometimes together as well, supporting the right team. However, time's not with us, and I am going to invite you on air to come back and talk about certain things of commonalities and how we have these commonalities between Christianity and Islam. Not many are aware. Not many people share these commonalities. We've got 1 minute, and you've only got 30 seconds to address the nation as such and say your piece, hopefully, before we get
Well, I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you, Yusuf, and the IQRA TV for inviting me to speak with you today. It's a great privilege for me as a Catholic priest to be able to address your TV station and your audience. I would ask that God's blessing come down upon all of you. God's blessing come down upon your charitable endeavours in the third world and in all places. And most of all, I'd ask you to remember that what unites us is far greater than what divides us. God bless you and thank you.
Thank you very much. Couldn't said. I told you he was wiser. Great wise words from Father Gerard Vincent Barry. And thank you very much. We thank you on behalf of the IQRA TV, and hopefully we'll see you back again shortly. Unfortunately, viewers, brothers, sisters at home, until next week, Wednesday, 6 o'clock. See you soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.